All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another Unauthorized Caucus. You've got your hosts here, Ryan Hine, Andrew Muller. We are glad to be with you on another Thursday. We've got a beautiful day here, at least in the Midwest. Got the heat came in, and then it got a little bit cool, but we are definitely heating up on the political fronts, and that is what we're here to talk about today. So before we go much further, let me go ahead and remind you right off the bat, like Andrew and I have already done, and you need to do too, subscribe to the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles email list. That's the number one way to make sure you're censor-proof. Go to phyllisschlafly.com, sign up on that little banner that pops up on the top there. Give us your name and email. I promise we don't sell it, don't trade it. We don't use you as a bargaining chip. We just make sure to get you the information like when this live stream is coming out each and every week. Good reminders, nice and short information. And then also go and wherever you're watching this, YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, hit the like button, hop into the comments, hop into the chat. Let us know. First of all, that boosts our algorithms really well, puts this video in front of more people, puts our content in front of the right eyes. But also, it gives us some good feedback. Let us know what you think. If there's topics you'd like us to hit, things we aren't hitting, if you have something today on the topic that we're going to cover, let us know. We want to know from you what it is that is helpful for us to talk about, because this is all about conversation. So in light of that, Andrew, we've had a little bit of a raucous political week this week. But then again, we could also call it underwhelming, I think we would say. What do you think the indictment of President Trump is going to yield? A big old fat nothing burger, a sure election victory? I've heard the predictions all over the map and everything in between. What's your hot take on what we saw out of Manhattan this week?
Yeah, trumped up charges, no doubt, no pun intended. 34 different elements in this indictment, which led to his arraignment. Pretty much all very similar, all 34 counts that they're trying to charge President Trump with. Listen, this is shady politics 101, the weaponization of the judiciary to attack a political opponent, because Donald J. Trump is pro-America against the deep state. But when you have a letter from Michael Cohen's lawyer saying in 2018 or 2019 that Donald Trump had nothing to do with this payment to Stormy Daniels. You have a letter from Stormy Daniels at a time. If she said she retracts that or not, there was a letter with Stormy Daniels saying this never happened with Donald J. Trump. So really all the key players in this are saying, wait a minute, this isn't as reported and isn't as spun from the media, but yet we still have these charges and indictments against the president. I think it's hilarious. Trump posted on Truth Social right before he went into the courthouse that Alvin Bragg in the city of New York is going to spend $200 million on this trial by the time everything's over with police and security and whatever they have to do to make this happen. Over $130,000 non-disclosure agreement, which, by the way, isn't illegal last time I checked, to have a non-disclosure agreement. If you like it or not, we can just talk about that. But legally, not really a big case, certainly not to this extent. So I don't think anything's going to come of it. Hopefully in the end, I think President Trump will get off the hook. They're trying to stain his name. I think they're trying to slow down the process, pushing this out. I think the next time they're going to meet in person is maybe December or January. Long ways away, which I know is fairly typical for something like this, but still, it's a part of their agenda to weaponize Trump. And it's hopefully going to help him in the long run, because people are seeing, whoa, this guy is standing between us and the deep state, because he's standing up for us and fighting for liberty and fighting for America against the elites, against the deep state, and against the globalist Marxist powers that be. So hopefully nothing comes of it, and hopefully it just makes him stronger.
Right. And I'll drop a couple of things down here in the comments below, just in case anyone is looking for more information on this. And I say in the comments, by the way, as a side note, I recognize our software really plays nice with Facebook, YouTube, and the others, but Rumble not as much. So I'll make sure and get back if you don't see it for some reason, you're watching on Rumble, email me, Ryan@phyllisschlafly.com. I'll get you the links and the resources that we talk about each week. But I'm going to drop a couple of things down here. It really has just, to your point, it's a dog and pony show. I mean, I read the indictment, the unsealed charges. It's almost like they hit copy and paste 33 times. And then it just has different dates on it. It's ridiculous. And even then there's, what was it? I was looking over some different legal analysis. It's like I don't think ever been a time when a first time offender on this has actually seen the inside of a jail cell. It's so ridiculous the way that it's played up versus what it is. And it's not that I'm trying to excuse anything that was wrong, if it was behavioral practices or business, financial practices or whatnot. What's very clear though is the political Trump-uppedness that we have come up with here, and it's pretty ridiculous. Again, the the main hypocrisy, watching the New York County District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, stand there in front of the cameras and talk about how no one can skirt justice, when in fact, 52% of his cases last year, they sought very hard to downgrade them from felonious activities, something they could just sweep away. I mean, it's so political. It is such an abuse of his office that it's just not funny. It's actually terrifying that this is the new standard. And that's what I'm trying to post here in the comments below. I mean, this is ushering in the era of a banana republic here in the US, when the government patently does whatever they want. To whoever they want. We'll just make something up and stick it to them and figure out how to throw our political opponents away. That is not America. It doesn't matter if you like Donald Trump or not. That's not how we behave in this country. So I think at this point, I mean, there's, you said it, I said it. There's not a whole lot more to say. That's kind of where that is. So I don't think anything comes of this except apparently a massive fundraising jag for Donald Trump. Definitely a lot of attention to the GOP field. And I don't think that much else will come out of this. It seems to be, from all legal opinions I can find that are down the middle, this is pretty flimsy to begin with. And likely, I don't know, kind of makes me wonder if they're trying to make him strong. I don't know. I can't quite wrap my mind around it. But that's that. The news that we wanted to hit for the week. I think there was, let me see, what was it? There was something else we talking about. I don't remember what it was. Or maybe not. Andrew, you can remind me, because there were a couple of quick hits we wanted to bring up to everyone before we get right down to our topic today.
Didn't want to talk about RFK, did we?
The RFK? No, I don't think so. There's not a whole lot. You and I were going back and forth about that. That's interesting. If you have an opinion on Robert Kennedy Jr. jumped into the presidential race on the Democratic side yesterday. Obviously, he has been a very strong voice on anti-mandates, forced vaccine stuff. It's been very interesting. So that's going to be maybe a political insider thing, but that'll be kind of fun to watch, to see if he's a disruptor to the race. Obviously, we had that in 2020. We had this Tulsi Gabbard effect, which actually I was watching an interview on that. That's really interesting to look down her reasoning, because I know a lot of people don't trust her. I don't necessarily know quite what to think of her. She says conservative things, but then again, you've been a Democrat in the era of all this. But if you look back over the course of it, this shift from liberalism to leftism to Marxism has really taken place in the last 10 years inside the party. And there's a lot of holdouts that are gone now. They're not, part of the Democrats anymore. So it's kind of an interesting thing to look at the RFK Jr. and wonder what's going to happen in 2024. You let us know, anyone out there, if you have some insight that we don't have. That's going to be a weird thing to get into. But let's dive in, Andrew, here to that today, because again, this actually ties into it. We're talking about who's going to be running for president. We're talking about RFK Jr. and pandemic response and everything else. Here is what we wanted to get into. And you might notice, everyone, probably no one notices it like Andrew and I do when we come up with good puns for the titles. We love titling these things, something that probably no one else ever pays attention to, but we enjoy it. But here we've got the WHO, not the band, mind you, the World Health Organization. No one, the WHO. Both of them are, well, never mind. I'm going to withhold that musical opinion before I get, trounced on by people in the comments. The World Health Organization, which at this point, I think has proven itself at being good at nothing except being awful and coming up with bad opinions and then trying to exercise authority over things. They're good for that. And then they're good for having people, as doctors in foreign nations and movies. These are the only two things that I know anything about the WHO that are worthwhile. They are drafting a new treaty related to pandemics, this new zero draft. And actually, I had heard rumblings of this, but you sent me, Andrew, one of the best summations. Do you want to dive in and kind of give people real quick a little synopsis of what it is that we're talking about with this new, the WHO CA Plus treaty, which is incredibly flawed, and we ought to be very suspicious of treaties to begin with. And these are two things that we want to get into specifically, those two worlds. You want to give us a quick synopsis and kind of tell us what we're dealing with, and we'll try to bring this to people's attention and discuss a couple different angles of it as we go along here.
Yeah, so there's this WHO CA Plus, they call it, which is the World Health Organization Charter Agreement, which they're labeling this one as the zero draft. And Ryan, you can put that Heritage article in the comments where it has a little bit of a rundown of this. So I want to kind of touch on some of the surface level issues with this draft and some of the problems it has and different arguments people have proposed. But a lot of people aren't talking about this, and that's another cause for concern. But really, the main idea here is that this draft is very heavily in favor of China. It totally eviscerates the idea of intellectual property, and it gives away U.S. sovereignty. Now, a lot of people are attacking this charter and saying we could make it better so that it wouldn't take away U.S. sovereignty and Biden shouldn't sign it. Well, agreed, we shouldn't do that. But this opens a even deeper root cause to make the statement where we shouldn't even be a part of the World Health Organization, because no matter what charter agreement we concede to, no matter what rule book we acquiesce to, we're still a part of a system of global governance. And just the act in and of itself, no matter how great the charter agreement is, we're relinquishing United States sovereignty. So I have more to say on that, but I'll get to that in a minute. But just the idea of the UN, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, these things, just participating in them gives away U.S. sovereignty. So there's just that note. So it doesn't matter what the charter is, what the treaty is, what the legislation is, just the act of being involved in it is bad enough. So the charter has a couple issues with it. A lot of people like Senator Rick Scott and former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann have kind of come out and really attacked this charter, and rightfully so. And a lot of left-wing news organizations in my research and looking into this came out and said, whoa, guys, calm down. This does not give away U.S. sovereignty. Even the Biden administration's like, come on, calm down, guys. This doesn't give away U.S. sovereignty because it has this one statement in it, this one paragraph, and I'll read it to you here very briefly. And this is the kind of caveat everyone's saying, oh, this makes it okay. States have, in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations and the principles of international law, the sovereign right to determine and manage their approach to public health. Well, by the way, there's no sovereignty in that because it says in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations and the principle of international law. So there's no sovereignty in that. Well, you have sovereignty in accordance to these two things. So that's hogwash number one. Number two, it says the sovereign right to determine and manage their approach to public health, notable pandemic prevention, preparedness, response and recovery of health systems pursuant to their own policies and legislation. You have sovereignty. Well, there was a period there. Maybe that'd be a different story, but there's not. There's a comma. It continues to say, provided that activities within their jurisdiction or control do not cause damage to their peoples and other countries. So at the end of the day, states have sovereignty in accordance to the Charter of the United Nations and principles of international law. And don't worry, you have the sovereign right to determine what you're going to do with pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response and recovery of health systems, as long as your policies and legislations within your jurisdiction and control don't cause damage to people in your country or other countries. So who decides what damage is? Who decides what's fair and unfair to other countries? Just that loses sovereignty. This statement is the opposite of what everyone's saying. This statement does not give sovereignty and reassure us that everything's going to be peachy keen. It's the opposite, because this is the trumped up lie that we've been fed, where you can be a part of the UN, you can be a part of the World Health Organization, you can be a part of the World Economic Forum and still keep your national sovereignty. That's not true. Just the act of being in this and having to acquiesce to the rules of it makes you lose national sovereignty. The other thing that's wrong with this, Ryan, is that it classifies China as a developing country. Now, in my opinion, China's not a developing country. They're a very civilized and very advanced country. So this charter agreement is saying that they are a developing country. Well, guess what benefits developing countries get under this charter? They get access to intellectual property, whether that be vaccine technology, medical advancements, personal protection equipment, you name it with regard to pandemic response. They get priority access and priority equitable dispersion and receival of these goods and services. I.e., if a country like the United States comes up with a great medical advancement, patents and intellectual property goes out the window because we need to have an equitable distribution of this property. Does it sound like Marxism or a collectivist idea? Read Agenda 30. It says a collectivist goal in there over and over again. So this whole charter's hogwash, and we really shouldn't be debating the details of it and what's good or bad about it, because no matter what, it's a loss that we're even talking about.
Right.
This should not be a discussion. We should not be in this global stage of governance where the U.S. is involved in World Health Organization and World Health response. So don't really pay much attention to the details of the treaty and try to get us out of the treaty like Donald Trump did. He got us out of the World Health Organization. But that's just a temporary fix. Americans need to be educated and go read George Washington's farewell address, which I'd like to read an excerpt of in a second, that says avoid foreign entanglements and global governance. That's really the bottom line.
Right. And I mean, that's you are hitting the nail on the head. And that's the thing, as we dive into this, this is one of those where we could go down and I looked at the document itself. I started to look through, but really, as you just zip back, there are a few massive, deep flaws to begin with. And the hurdle, the level of scrutiny that should be applied to treaties because of the force of federal law that they carry when we sign on is just so high. This one doesn't even pass the smell test to get into, quite frankly, but it's not being talked about that much. And this kind of reminds me, we talked a lot about this and I say we, Phyllis Schlafly and her organizations talked a lot about this in the 90s through into the 2000s, the 2008, 9, 10 era. We had a lot of stuff during Clinton, during Obama. We had stuff during Bush where we dealt with the Law of the Sea Treaty, the Treaty on the Child, Treaty on the Woman. There were a ton. In fact, what you should do if you want to get a little bit of a handle on this, but see the little snippets throughout history, our recent history of dealing with UN treaties, go to phyllisschlafly.com and just search. You can open up two windows or two tabs. Just search on one of them. Search treaty and search on another one, treaties, plural. You will find a wealth of information where Phyllis will take these on at different points and throughout her history of writing columns and daily commentaries on the radio, you'll find her talking about treaties in general. And that's what you're about to get to right now is to the very cautious way in which we should approach treaties and foreign entanglements, most of them not even getting into. This is something that we've talked about for a long time, but it seems like it's been a little on the dormant side. And now that it's rising to the top again, it's almost just ludicrous that it's the World Health Organization, who at this point we have, established by fact was involved in covering up the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, this treats China with kid gloves when in fact, like you said, China is no growing, developing economy. China is our leading world enemy. They are our leading enemy in the world, and they are diametrically opposed to the very way of life of any free living Western country. And yet this is treating them with kid gloves and just handing stuff over to them. And honestly, that's a whole separate conversation in and of itself. The intellectual property world, China already takes whatever they want through spying and digital initiatives. And now we just have to give it over to them. This is just on its face so ludicrous, almost like when you read the actual indictment from the Manhattan DA, Donald Trump. It's just like, this doesn't even pass the sniff test. There's no way. And yet it's flying fast. It's flying under the radar because, and I'll make this last comment. It's just not even conspiratorial anymore. I mean, the World Economic Forum and their ilk literally get online onto publicly available live streams and tell you what they're planning. And it involves very powerful people, very powerful corporations, business leaders, world leaders, basically saying, we don't care if there's a sovereign state here and a sovereign nation here. We're going to put our fingers into everything and control and manipulate. Some of it you'll agree to, some of it you won't. And here's what we're going to do. We know best, we're in charge. I mean, it's not even a conspiracy to talk about. And here is something that you're actually signing on to and handing some of this stuff away. It's absolutely ludicrous. So I could post article after article, but go to phyllisschlafly.com, search the phrase treaty, search treaties, plural. I guarantee you will find more well-written information across specific treaties and just the topic in general than you may have ever read before. You'll also find a lot of stuff about China and IP. So go ahead, though. I know you wanted to get to something here, a reference, and a lot of where Phyllis drew this basic principle in America from was the warning of George Washington and others throughout history as well. You want to continue there with what I think you were heading toward?
Yeah, and I have my bust of Washington. I was going to put it on the desk, but you can't really see it. But, this is so important. Washington's farewell address addresses a plethora of subjects and political ideologies and principles. But I want to read to you, and this is not a super long excerpt from the address that was published, but it's a little bit of a sizable one, but the words are incredibly important. Okay, I might jump around a little bit, but I'll let you know. It won't take long. Listen to these words from the first president of the United States, okay? This is so important to us today. Mm-hmm. He said, the nation which indulges towards another a habitual hatred or habitual fondness is in some degree a slave. It is a slave to its animosity or to its affection, either of which is sufficient to lead it astray from its duties and its interests. Has that happened to the United States? Antipathy in one nation against another disposes each more readily to offer insult and injury, to lay hold of slight causes of umbrage, and to be haughty and intractable. When accidental or trifling occasions of dispute occur, Hence frequent collisions, obstinate, envenomed, and bloody contests. The nation, prompted by ill will and resentment, sometimes impels to war the government, contrary to the best calculations of policy. So then I'm going to skip down for a second. He says that a result of this, the peace often, sometimes, perhaps the liberty of nations has been the victim of this idea or this policy of entangling foreign agreements. So he says, as avenues to foreign influences in innumerable ways, such as attachments, are particularly alarming to the truly enlightened and independent patriot. How many opportunities do they afford to tamper with domestic factions, to practice the arts of seduction, to mislead public opinion, to influence or awe the public councils? Such an attachment of a small or weak towards a great and powerful nation dooms the former to be the satellite of the latter. And he concludes in this: against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, the jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government. George Washington gives a chilling warning to the United States in its infancy that if you entangle your policy with foreign nations, you will become a slave to it, and liberty and Republican government will be the victim and penance to be a part of that system. That is exactly what has happened in America, and we have lost our sovereignty just by being involved in these institutions and organizations. And it's in direct contradiction to American federalism, American constitutionalism, and the principles of limited government. And we need to pull the U.S. out of the UN, out of the World Economic Forum, out of the World Health Organization, because we can make the best decisions for ourselves. We don't need China and other countries and other cultures that have totally different value systems and totally different worldviews behind them, Marxism and atheism, for example, will you, to dictate and take from us our sovereignty and our liberty.
Right. Absolutely. And that's exactly where we are. I posted the full, please, everyone, this is your historical moment for the week, that your homework. If there's one thing, you should go and read what Phyllis Schlafly had to say about treaties. You should go and look up all the intellectual property things as well. But start with reading, and it's not too terribly long. I mean, it's long, but it's not awful. George Washington's farewell address. I just posted a link to it from an organization here down in the comments and the chat. And I think that is a good place to start, because again, this is to apply the correct view of what we're going on here, to see kind of where Andrew and I are speaking from. It's not a short view. It is not a recent view. We are going back to the foundations of why are we here as Americans? Where did we come from? How was this built? And then how should we approach each of these different things? And again, I see someone here, Christ Crucified for You is talking about AI. General Flynn did have a very good article in the Western Journal, by the way, about AI being the next nuclear level threat for the United States. And it really is not just the threat to destroy something, the threat to, what was the phrase that he used? To erode all trust. And it really is. It's a very powerful thing. The founding fathers had no idea about artificial intelligence, and yet there are still principles that will be applied to this to figure out, how do we respond to this threat? How do we approach this? How do we look at it? And that's where we have to start as a baseline. So much more even than reading the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Go and read. This is my challenge to all of you, and it's difficult, it's hard, but it's worthwhile. Go and read what else the founding fathers wrote. Read their books, read their speeches, read their notes, read their documents. That's why I keep things. I've got several copies of the Federalist Papers, of notes on the Constitution, of all these different things, the writings of all of the founding fathers, because there are incredibly powerful nuggets to glean of how they viewed things. And this is one, particularly, how we ought to behave as a sovereign nation to the world around us, that George Washington gave us in his farewell address of 1796. Go and read that first, because we've got to have a baseline to be able to understand these things. Because when it comes to the world of artificial intelligence, just like it's being brought up, or when it comes to this new kind of treaty with pandemic-related responses, which this is a whole new thing as of our last few years of living, we need to have some sort of baseline to be able to bring. This is what I think about governance. Now I have to apply it to this brand new situation, with a bunch of brand new players, a bunch of brand new terminology and technology that has never existed before. And yet I, as a normal person, can work my way through this so that I can encourage my representatives in government to do the right thing. So this is, I feel like we're kind of glossing over something that is just huge. But I mean, this whole conversation, Andrew, you've given us a couple of great resources. I've posted the full link down there as well. This is something that, I mean, we gotta turn our attention to. This often comes in the background, and remember, this is, if you go and look at the Constitution proper, this is, you know, the role of the president and the Senate. This is a very few people. 2/3 of 100 members of the Senate body, plus the one president of the United States, are making these decisions that have incredibly grave consequences. And it's not that it can't be undone, but once you get into it, I mean, what are we doing? Instantly giving over technological secrets and access to our chief enemy in the world. I mean, this gets very dangerous very quickly. And we already see that you know, that bear, well, not the bear, I guess. What is the bear? Russia. Have we decided what animal represents China in our little?
I'm going with the snake.
The snake.
I
I think
know
we should
what
go
they
with
want.
Winnie the Pooh. We'll go with Winnie the Pooh. So it is a bear. It's just the reference of Xi Jinping. You remember he didn't like. Oh, never mind. We're getting deep into meme culture there. I'll back off. We'll go with the snake. The dragon. That's what it is. We have to harken back to our good friends. What was it? Greg Autry and several others. They've talked about the red dragon. There we go. I remember now. But there's a significant threat here that the United States is dealing with, and it's not getting talked about. In fact, I would argue, and this is something that we talk about in media class whenever I get a chance to talk about finding truth in news and media headlines, when we're talking about something so utterly ridiculous, so utterly crazy, it is likely a distraction for something. So the absolutely ridiculous charges against Donald Trump coming out of Manhattan at the exact same time that this is starting to gather some news and some steam, this new WHO CA Plus treaty. This is very interesting indeed. We're going to have a circus of information to try to prevent people from realizing that we're dealing with another round of treaties, a lot of which we've beaten off in the last few years. And here we are back to this. So this is a very far-ranging thing. I'm going to post a couple more things, I think, in the comments here down below. But I see someone else mentioning the Heritage Guide to the Constitution. Yeah, there's a lot of really good resources out there to kind of get a baseline. But yeah, this is absolutely a sweeping and dramatic treaty, a sweeping and dramatic something that would come with the force of federal law that has implications across lots of spectrums, across healthcare, across the pandemic response that we've seen, government, going wild with power against our adversarial, Chinese communists across the ocean. There is an incredible risk to this, as there is with any treaty, and this one is just a no-go from the very beginning. People need to know about it. So go and read that article, go and check it out, and then dive into treaties in general, because I think that as we continue to march through the Biden administration, this seems to come up so much more. Andrew, would you agree during Democrat, and I know that we've kind of entered this. Well, I was thinking about this morning. We've kind of entered a third wave, a new wave of conservatism. We had traditional conservatism, and then there was, the modern religious right, and then we kind of had this new, that continued until we got to this Tea Party wave. We've really hit this new wave of conservatism that is focused on an understanding of globalism, the problem of globalism, and how sovereignty is the answer. It's the solution that we already have. Let's not let go of it. And I feel like that has really pulled Republicans away from this falling into dumb treaties we shouldn't be involved in. But even so, if they've been involved in the past, it's really during Democratic, or I should say Democrat, because there's nothing democratic about the Democrat Party. Let's be abundantly clear. It's really during Democrat administrations that this stuff ramps up. So during the Biden administration, just like during the Obama administration, we are going to have to be very mindful of this stuff because it's coming down the pike. The person in charge who wants to sign us onto the treaties is sitting in the Oval Office. And that is going to be something we need to be educated on and have some good conversations around. So, Andrew, do you have any wrap-up thoughts? I realize we've already gone about a half hour here. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So you got anything to close us out on?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate pretty much essentially what I said is that we need to return back to those founding principles and return back to the words of our founding fathers in our Constitution and realize that to have a Christian federal constitutional republic, a Republican form of government that has separated powers, that includes state sovereignty and a federal government that has very limited enumerated powers to protect God-given rights, inalienable rights given by God, not by government, for us to continue in that self-governing Republican system, we have to retain our sovereignty as a nation, and we have to hearken back to that national idea and national identity that we have as Americans to realize, you know what, we don't operate on the world stage and concede our liberties to other nations in the name of equity and inclusion and diversity. That's not us. Our diversity is in our liberty and in our God-given abilities and talents within our country. So we need to return to that, and we need to return to those principles of liberty and get off the world stage and quit entangling our foreign affairs with other countries who hate us and want to see us go into the abyss of despotism.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Well, we will go ahead and wrap it there for the week. We got a lot of stuff we could talk about, but I think this is something we should just break it off, let people go, do some reading, do some research, shoot us an email, shoot us a call here at the center. If you'd like to dive into this further, if you'd like to ask questions, you have comments, we would love to continue this conversation because it is something that I feel like we haven't heard much of really since the 2016 election cycle. We've had a lot of domestic issues we've been dealing with, and rightly so, but this one's coming back around again. And we're going to need this new generation of people who've been involved politically because of Donald Trump to really start to grasp this issue and be mindful of it as we march forward, because this is not just something that Democrats fall for. There have been many Republicans who do not understand the seriousness with which we should treat treaties and the suspicious nature that we should be throwing to the United Nations, which is truly an awful organization that just exists for the sole purpose of ruining and eroding our sovereignty and the sovereignty of other nations to the hands of the corrupt. So take a look, everyone. Do some good reading. I see here a couple before we die off. I see the program is on Rumble, but none of the chat postings. That's right. We're still trying to get a couple of kinks worked out. Rumble's live streaming is not as forthright as some others. So I promise for everyone, Phyllis and a couple others I see speaking down here about that, we will make sure and get that on. I don't know exactly where the Rumble chat pulls everything from, but we will make sure that we get everything as we move over to that platform here fully. In addition to all the others we're on, we'll make sure it gets a little bit more seamless. We appreciate you being with us, being over there as we continue to fight the balance. Andrew and I always talk about controversial stuff, and we keep getting strikes on YouTube. So I think today we're safe. I think we're safe. We did talk about the pandemic, though, so we're probably going to get a little COVID misinformation label just because of who we are. But you never know. So make sure and go ahead, like and share and subscribe wherever you are so that you're following us there. Go over to the Rumble channel as much as we're working out those details so that you've got something a little censor-proof if we wake up one morning and YouTube has given us the axe. And then, of course, as always, go to phyllisschlafly.com. Not only can you search for treaties, for intellectual property, for China, for great wisdom from Phyllis Schlafly, because she always went back to and pulled from the Founding Fathers, but you can sign up for our email so that we can get it to you and also notify you when cool things like this are happening that you can be a part of and discuss, and then take those discussions on to your friends and family and other conservatives you know. So we will end it there. Let me go ahead and say Happy Easter to all of you. We hope that both of you, Andrew and I, hope that you have a wonderful weekend with friends as we celebrate truly the finishing of the story of real freedom, of the liberty that Christ gives us, offering to be our Lord and Savior if we turn to him and repent. So I pray that this is a wonderful weekend for you to spend time reflecting on that, celebrating that, and that if not, that you would consider that too. As we talk about American freedom, that you would turn in your life and look at the option of getting real freedom found in the law of liberty in the Lord. So we do pray that you would be blessed, and we thank you for being a part of this. We'll look forward to talking to you next Thursday. We'll have another hot topic. We'll talk to something domestic, something foreign. You never know what's going to happen next in New York. So we'll cover that then, and we will see you in a week. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.